Hello, friends, well wishers, and fellow techies. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, BI End-to-End Training with Deepak. So, it has been quite some time. I arranged the last session. So there are some obvious reasons that I have taken some gap. Uh, I have been pretty much busy with my projects. And secondly, as I mentioned and promised in my initial sessions, I would want to deliver a very quality training and a very unique training that is not actually repeatable anywhere else. And I would want to give and deliver a most practical approach for the concepts that I wanted to explain in this training as part of the BI end-to-end training. All right, so I have jotted down many subpoints as part of this end-to-end training, and this is the sequence that we need to follow for an end-to-end BI project, in fact, and the concepts that we need to learn. Uh, so it will be a very, exhaustive approach that I apply. So, and every session probably will cover only few topics, but in a more, in a more holistic approach. Let me just start with so today's session or this session. I would want to go through the first chapter, that is RDBMS, that is the first part of BA into training, and the first subchapter of that is what are databases and database management systems. So I'll try to compare it with the actual product SQL Server from Microsoft and why it is called as RDBMS product, and why it is called as relational, and all the concepts that are related to it. So let's begin with sharing my screen and the agenda again back and again here. So let me share my screen. All right, here we go. So I did explain this in my last session. The agenda of the RDBMS. So concepts and deep dive. So in fact, I've already recorded the text and the excerpts and the phrases that I wanted to explain in this PPT, so that you can easily find out any concept that actually I explained orally here. Then you can do a control F in this PPT as well. So this PPT is updated, and I will be sharing this PPT back again through another medium as well. So let's dive into these concepts here. So database and database management systems. So what is actual definition of the database, and what is the actual definition of database management systems? So let's not complicate this. Uh, a database is an organized collection of data generally stored and accessed electronically from a computer system. Wherever databases are more complex, they're often developed using formal design and modeling techniques. So it's a simple, straight, plain for definition. Collection of data. So there is a difference between subtle difference between data and information, as you know, right? So you have a lot of information that you gather from varied sources, and then when you convert it to data, right, it gives some meaningful reporting or reports on top of the information you have. So information can be I'll explain the next slide on the structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data. So I will also end up with structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data, and then dwell into other concepts at a later stage. All right. So, as a you have data from files, your Excels, databases as well, other relational database. So everything will be stored electronically because the DBMS is the program that actually stores that. So it's a UI based program that actually performs all these actions. So whenever the data is huge, or have a lot of relational dependencies with other databases or other data, then you will have to use a formal design and modeling technique, just as I explained in the agenda, that entity relationship modeling. All right. So then coming to DBMS, as I already explained, it's the software that interacts with end users, applications, and database itself to capture and analyze the data. All right. So it gives you the intuition. I'll explain, as I already, mentioned that compare against the actual program of Microsoft SQL Server. So DBMS software additionally encompasses the core facilities provided to administer the database. So database administration, this is called database. So database administration has many other concepts as well, like statistics, indexes, defragmentation, fragmentation, what the memory settings, the database file growth, differential backup, log backup, transaction log backup, many other activities a part of the database administration. The sum total of the database, the DBMS, and the associated applications can be referred to as database systems. So you have a database. I'll show it to you against the Microsoft SQL Server. The DBMS, so the software is called as DBMS, and the associated applications. There are other applications inside the software, like the management inside the database as well. You have SQL Server agent where the jobs run. There are other codes like stored procedures, functions that are available. So let me show it to you here. Often the term database is also used to loosely refer to any of the DBMS, the database system, or an application associated with the database. So don't get confused here. Just differentiate. There is a complete differentiation between database and database management system. Don't club both of them. They're totally unique. All right. So let me show you, go back to the Microsoft SQL Server product. So this is the database management system or for Microsoft SQL Server. So this is the software. So I'll explain you in the coming weeks or in the coming sessions as well, where uh, you know the methodologies to install the Microsoft SQL Server, how to install this product. The Microsoft gives you Microsoft SQL Server as a separate SQL, separate where you run only the SQL queries as SQL Express, and entire SQL Server comes up with the BI product as well. So all the SSIS, AS, and RS is part of the SQL Server. So usually this UI is referred to as SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. So let me just get this. I'll just mention here in as part of some notes. So it is called as, let me say this as, you know, so SSMS. So it is called as, SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. So regret for my typos, but SQL Server Management Studio. Um, so this is a UI application, but it performs all the RDBMS tasks, all the, as I'll be explaining in the coming sessions on what are the different DML, DDLs, and what are the TSQL codes that we can run on this SSMS, in fact. So if you can see, so I'm just restricting this session to only the databases and DBMS and RDBMS. So here, if you can see, these are the set of databases that are available here. So I installed this SQL server, so you can install multiple instances on one SQL server. So if you see, there will be a certain specific set of inbuilt databases called a system database that are by default when you install that they are installed. Okay. So it's a great UI and very intuitive UI that they have developed. So every database has a specific purpose here. Uh, Master will hold the specifics about each database, other user-defined database. So I created another user-defined database called as RDBMS. You can also create a new database, something like this. Okay, new database. So let me create this new database. So this is reacting very slow. Basically, it also depends. So this SQL Server also depends on the memory that is available in your machine. So you can give something like session 1 RDBMS. All right. So you can in fact set the logical name of the database and the log file. So every database has, you know, MDF file and NDF file. So this is called as MDF. So master data file. So I would say this is called as MDF. And there are subsets of the MDF called as NDF for the database. So I'll explain you in coming sessions and the agenda that I have, like explaining all the SQL Server architecture in internals, TSQL, and all those. But this is only restricted to database and RDBMS, DBMS, as I mentioned. All right. So every database has an MDF file and a log file. Okay. Now, if you see, this was performing very slow, and that's, I see that as one of the blockage or a hindrance in any database application. So other programs that are running on my machine here are interfering with the memory on this MS SQL Server. So if you go into the properties of SQL Server here, you can set the maximum and minimum memory. So there's a minimum memory and the maximum memory, right? So this is GB 214 GB, but we don't have 214 GB anyway. So when you limit this to a minimum value, so for example, I will only limit this to 80 MB or 100 MB, and this is available for only SQL Server. So rest everything will be available as part, the other processes. So you also can connect to integration services here. If you see analysis service integration reporting as your storage, so these also consume some memory from this instance. So when you set minimum memory on SQL Server, other services will get more memory. I'll explain you all those services in coming sessions as well. So you have model database, MSDB. I'll explain the purpose of these databases as well in the coming weeks. And that's part of the Microsoft SQL Server completely. So I would cover, so basically these are the ones that I will cover. So one is MS SQL Server, sorry, um, you know, server installation, all right, and uh, all the databases, default, all the default databases or built-in databases, default and built-in databases, purpose of each database, okay, and third one is other UI components in SSMS. So this is SQL Server Management Studio. So I'm dwelling right away into, the product that we use in the projects. All right. So obviously, when we try to interlink, then there comes, a practical approach here. And the second scenario I explained is the slowness of SQL Server. So the most common scenario, this in live projects. Nobody explains this. Then I explained you the memory settings there. Yeah. So deep dive well, let me do this in the coming sessions as part of SQL Server and SQL Server internals. All right. So it's very useful in terms of practical approach and also in terms of the failed scenarios. how would you tackle with them? All right. So I'll also explain, you know, the connectivity issues to the SQL Server instance. So you find many others, a network connection error. So this error was the one when so I I fixed this on this specific machine when I installed this SQL Server. I resolved it, but later due to the credential changes and all those, I was still the error popped up again, and then I had to resolve that. So I'll be showing this approach as well later on as part of SQL Server and SQL Server internals network connection error, and you have other TCP/IP port error. All right. So all right. So let me stop it here because this is more into SQL Server. So RDBMS, I created an RDBMS database. So now these databases, right? So you have to compare it against the concepts here. So these are the databases. And this system, this UI system, entire UI system, which is called as SQL Server Management Studio, is the RDBMS system, is an application, is a UI application. So it is so DBMS can be relational, hierarchical, distributed, different types of databases, so corresponding DBMS systems. But this is RDBMS, relational database, because you can relate one entity to the other entity here. And like for example, I go into MSDB here, so you have a lot of interlinks between many tables here. So system tables. Um, I don't want to dwell much at this moment, but this is part of the SQL Server. But I just want to see why. Just want to portray how this is called as a relational database systems. All the entities that are there that are present in this database are interlinked through primary and the foreign keys as well. So, for example, if you see sys jobs, this should have. So, I don't have any jobs at the moment, so you cannot see those jobs. So, let me sys alerts, for example. Probably, yeah, there are no alerts also. So, every entity, so that's what I just want to explain. So, this all the sys jobs part, how you create the jobs, it's part of the SQL server. I'll dwell into that at a later point. But these are the tables that you see, and you have views. Views are combination of it's not actually stored on the database, but it's you can join multiple tables and showcase it as a view for mainly used for reporting. So synonyms, it's for basically for the security purpose. I'll explain that as part of SQL. So programmability, so you have stored procedure functions, triggers, assemblies, rules, defaults, types, plan guide sequences. Okay. So service broker is for communication systems. This is also part of SQL Server totally. So you can also set the security. So this is an end-to-end DBMS application and a perfect application for DBMS. I would call it as RDBMS. So perfect application for RDBMS. So now you have other components as well as I explained. So this is where I just want to explain you what is DBMS and database. All right. So coming to the next concept, structured, semi-structured, unstructured databases. Yeah. So why we need to know this is basically, unstructured databases, semi-structured. So just keep aside semi-structured databases, unstructured databases. They are a wide variety of data sources that come under big data as well. So you have PDF files, you have notepads that don't have the structured data, so it is very easy to store a structured data, but it is very difficult to process an unstructured data like a PDF file. So they all come under semi-structured and unstructured data. So let us go and dwell into the differences. So as we saw the DBMS, the RDBMS application from Microsoft, which is called as Microsoft SQL Server, and which is again called as SQL Server Management Studio. So that is the UI part, UI application. So it holds very structured database, structured structured data in there as well. So it follows all the acid properties. So that I'll explain in the next concept. So acid is in the next concept. Atomicity, consistency, integrity, and durability. Isolation and durability, sorry. So everything, the structured database will follow acid properties, and anomalies, duplicacies, and there is no discrepancy in the data as well. So even if you want to update some data that is relational to another entity or another database, so it would actually alert you. So you cannot update this entity without updating the other entity. All right. So let's dwell into the differences. So level of organizing structured data, as name suggests, this type of data is well organized, as I told, and hence level of organizing highest. All right. On the other hand, in case of semi-structured data, organized up to some extent only, and rest is non-organized, hence the level of organizing is less than that of structured data. That's fine. I mean, this is a pretty straightforward one. Data is fully non-structured, but you have to understand what are the examples under this. Structured, as I showed you, Microsoft SQL Server, RDBMS. You use ER modeling techniques to also store huge data, and when you have huge number of sources that you have, all right, that is a structured one. Semi-structured is something like XML files and JSON files. So XML has its own attribute, had tags, right? Root element, subroot element, and the values. So basically, it follows XSD schema. So there is some structure, but it is not, uh, you know, fully organized. So you can load XML data also into the database. So I'll also be explaining that loading XML data so into the SQL server here. So let me just note that down. So where is that? Yeah, I'll also explain how to load into SQL Server. All right, so this is also one of the most important activities that we do as part of BA projects. All right. Um so means of data organization, structured data is organized by means of relational database, as I showed you. While in some case of similar data parser means of XML, as I told you, or RDF, relational database functions. All right. On other hand, in case of unstructured data is based on simple character and binary data. So as is PDF images or Outlook mails. So there's no structure for the transaction management. So in structured data manage concurrency of data, as I told you, asset properties, and hence mostly preferred in multitasking. So even the locking and the blocking mechanisms will be avoided in this specific structured data. In semi-structured is not by default, but is adapted from DBMS. So data concurrency is not, so it's a middle layer between unstructured. No transaction mechanisms available. All right. So these are some of the differences that you can see. There are other differences as well. Pretty straightforward. Versioning, as mentioned, versioning is done over tuple rows. So you can put a version of the old data, historical data, and insert the new data. Whereas you can also update the old data as well. So versioning is most common in relational database. On the other hand, in case semi-structure, versioning is only where tuples are present as partial database. So it's partial again. So there's no versioning in unstructured. Flexible and scalable, as structured data is based on relation, it becomes schema dependent and less flexible as well as less scalable. So structured is very so I would say it is more scalable. I can say it is more scalable, but less flexible, because updates go through many roles, but more scalable in terms of the capacities or the enhancements that a company who invented that specific product provides. All right. And also it depends on the memory. I just want to correct, it's more scalable in fact, while in case it's more flexible. I know that because it's unstructured, you can update like without any rules. Okay. And this is less scalable. I can say this should be less scalable. And this is obviously it's now you can make it as obvious conclusion there. Performance is structure. We can perform structured query which allow complex joining, and this performance is highest. Yeah. And then semi structured. So anonymous nodes. So the nodes are part of the XML, right? So it's very. I feel a XML update within an XML automatically is a bit tedious. When you put it into a database, it's more easier. So it's not flexible. These both are not flexible, and the performance also decreases. All right. Okay. So let me go to the why we are actually going through this. So that's why do you need to understand this? Basically, you can directly dwell and go into the product, and then you can check what are the databases. You can learn TSQL and understand those concepts. But here we need to understand the method. Do you manipulate, transform the data into meaningful reporting? That uh, so you need to understand these concepts in order to make a meaningful report or a reporting on top of the unstructured data, semi-structured data as well. So you face a lot of sources in your projects, BI projects, and nowadays it's big data. Big data will involve a lot of unstructured data. All right, so and then the data science and all those on top of that big data. But these are all the basics. So just I don't want to dwell much complex into this. Definition is derived to the structure of data, as I told, structured, relational, structured, robust, and it is very robust. Semi-structured, as I explained, XML and JSON. JSON is part of, so this is part of .NET as well, .NET programming language. So I'll also dwell through JSON later point in time. Uh, so I can just note this down as part of this JSON. Uh, all right. So coming back. All right, slowing down. Okay, I'm back in here. All right, me, yeah. So semi-structured data that does not obey the tabular structure associated with relational. Already explained this, but most of the times you find semi-structured data, and uh, you know, let me go previous screen. Yeah. So in most of the projects, you find semi-structured data. Uh, but unstructured data processing is the most complex one. It needs more deep dive, like algorithms, deep learning, uh, artificial intelligence as well, and data science. So all this mixed up. You need to understand the unstructured data and convert into structured. Semi-structured XML, you find it very, very often. I'll explain you how to load XML data through SQL Server as part of Microsoft SQL Server training as well. So, so these are the steps, like a sequential step you need to go through. Um, I'll explain you in the next session how to load XML into SQL Server. All right. So how does XML looks like? How why it is called as a semi-structured, and how will you load into the database? All right. Uh, as I told you, unstructured data is video, audio, or image files, as well as logs files, sensors, or social media posts. So very difficult to process that data. So I will go into the database components in the next session. So for now, I will end this session with this one, and I'll explain more in a practical format. As I told you, I'll explain you the XML loading. I'll explain you the types of databases, SQL, what does it store, and all those as well. Wherever possible, I'll try to interlink to the product, and wherever it's not possible, it's not needed there. We don't need to complicate some of the straightforward concepts as well. but this will help you. So obviously, and in terms of the training perspective and the consumption perspective by the audience, you're trying, you can easily link what I'm trying to explain to the practical scenarios that you use in the projects. All right. So I'll explain more failure scenarios in the next session for all these concepts that I explained. So XML, I'll try to code in directly live session, and then I'll show you how XML is loaded, what are the errors, and also I'll explain when you're trying to connect to Microsoft SQL Server, what are the errors you face, all right, and how to resolve them, all right. And then when you don't have the relational system or ACID properties in a database, what are the errors that you face? I'll explain ACID properties in the next session as well. But what the concepts I explained until now, semi-structured, structured, and unstructured data, I'll try to show it practically in terms of Microsoft SQL Server product. Alright. So unstructured data I may not cover much because it involves a lot of data science, big data. Those are all the things that come in. Alright. So, but semi-structured, structured data. How do you insert data into a table? All those concepts. But although I explain practically here, I'll explain it back again into the Microsoft SQL Server when I come into the future, and also when I explain the SQL Server internals. I'll explain you the entire UI in the SSMS. So I was saying the SSMS, which is this one. So I'll explain you the entire each and every component here. Databases, database snapshots, what are database diagrams. There are a lot many things that go on as part of security, server objects, replication, always on, management, integration services, catalog. So I'll also try to explain how to connect to integration services, reporting services, analysis. So all of this will be maintained in this UI. This is called as SSMS, Azure Storage. Azure Storage is a next other concept. So you have SQL Server agent as well. You can create some jobs that are automatically scheduled. All right. I'll conclude with this portion now. And so, as I said, so it's a very, very deep dive dwelling that I do, so that once you are recruited into some company and then you work on some BA project, some a lot of surprises are in there. So, how would you start a BA project as well? So, you can interlink all these concepts to a BA project, all right, directly. So this is a very unique methodology training that I'm actually performing, which you don't get anywhere, in fact. So hope you had, enjoyed this session and also grabbed a lot of information. I'll try to do a lot of stuff like this, trying to fail, trying to connect, interlink many, many things. So if you go through it very carefully back again, this session, you will understand what is why we connected database DBMS RDBMS to a UI application called Microsoft. You have other tools as well, Oracle DB2, other from other companies as well. But we are concentrating Microsoft BI here. So all the BI that will run as part of SSMS here. If you can see integration analysis report, analysis is the core BI. Integration is the ETL, reporting is the reporting service. Azure storages, you can store some data in the Azure as well. That's a new concept. So I'll also dwell into the Azure concepts as part of this training as well. So thank you very much. Let me end this session at this moment. Thank you.